Mr.Bala Balendra basically is a chartered accountant. He's running a financial consultancy service in Sydney. He served as a deputy mayor also. He is very actively involved in public life and social life. And also he is running a Tamil association, temple association, and children's education and many other things. Because he is making a lot of money. That's why he is doing a lot of service. We also always disturbing him to give money like that. He's also giving money time to time for us. Whenever I go to Sydney, not myself, even Sita Raman or anybody from conference side going to Sydney, always is giving a lunch or dinner or a coffee or something. Is engaging our Tamil community wherever living, visiting Sydney, contacting him. Always is like that. இவரை பொறுத்தவரையில் உங்களுக்கு நல்லா தெரியும், பாலேந்திரா வந்து இலங்கை தமிழர். இலங்கையில் ஏற்பட்ட பிரச்சனைகளுக்கு பிறகு அங்கே போய் நிரந்தரமாக குடியேறி அந்த நாட்டினுடைய குடிமகனாகி அங்கே நிதி உதவி ஆலோசனை போன்ற பணிகளை தொடர்ந்து செய்து வருகிறார். அவரை இந்த அமர்வில் வரவேற்பதிலும் அவருடைய கருத்துக்களை கேட்பதிலும் நான் மிகுந்த மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகின்றேன். I am requesting you to give your speech.
உலகத் தமிழர் பொருளாதார நிறுவனம் சென்னை உலக பொருளாதார உச்சி மாநாடு 6வது உலகத் தமிழர் பொருளாதார மாநாட்டிற்கு தலைமை தாங்கும் மேத்தகு டாக்டர் பரமசிவம் பிள்ளை வையாபுரி, முன்னாள் குடியரசுத் தலைவர் மொரீஷியஸ் மற்றும் எனது நண்பர் திரு விஆர்எஸ் சம்பத் இப்பொழுது கூர்ண மாதிரி அவர் எல்லாருக்கும் எந்த இதிலையும் அவரை பார்க்கலாம். He is an omnipresent person. So this is his life. As he said, I'm delighted to be here, and I like to also mention that there are 4 speakers who have come from Australia. So that is one of the achievements I think we have made for this conference, and all of them will be talking at the different sessions. And my topic today is about the funding and the financing. And we know without funding we can't do any of the projects. Even in the Maanatukku kuda we need the funding, otherwise we can't conduct this conference. So this is one of the hurdles most of the entrepreneurs and industrialists, even small business people, they are facing all over the world. It's a common phenomenon for everybody. We know it is the sources of funding. Initially, it has been either by the government or by the banks. But now, the funding has become so complicated, and also at the same time, it is so simple. People have to tap the right places and the right institutions to get their funding. For example, in the larger projects like infrastructure, energy, power, communication, transport, and water services, generally it is funded by the government or with the public-private partnership arrangements. So this is the phenomenon that we see that everywhere, not only in India, even in Australia. And the availability of additional resources to meet the increasing needs of investments, increased efficiency in project delivering and operation, access to advanced technology, sustainable development in infrastructure facilities and services. The sources of finance, the project financing may be from a variety of different sources. Either it can be equity by debt financing and government grants. Financing from other alternative sources have important implications on project overall costs. Equity is mainly met by the public-private partnership projects, and debt referred to is the borrowed capital from banks or other financial institutions. I'll just touch upon India, although I think you may be aware of what the Indian government initiatives are. There is one of the interesting thing I found was the government of India's Viability Gap Funding scheme. That's an example of institutional mechanism for providing financial support to public-private partnerships in infrastructure. A grant is provided under this scheme with the objective of making projects commercially viable. The viability gap funding can take various forms, including capital grants, subordinated loans, operation and maintenance support grants, and interest subsidies. A mix of capital and revenue support may also be considered. Yesterday's speakers, including the minister, mentioned about how the funding in India is available for even to small industries, small individual businesses, but it is the right, they should know how to tap these funds. And I think also from the statistics, what I heard yesterday, it looks like we are, as Tamil Nadu and India is progressing pretty well compared to most of the other Western nations, including US or Australia for that matter. But we are all faced with a big challenge in the last, it started a couple of years ago, and it appears to be we are going to have more difficulties, as yesterday Dr. Sitaraman mentioned about the future of the industries in India as well as other places. I'll just touch upon about Australia. And Australia had 28 years of consecutive annual economic growth. It is setting a new record among the developed economies. This enviable record of steady growth proves the robustness of Australia's economy and its reliability as a low-risk and safe environment in which to do business. Australia's economy is the 14th largest economy in the world, and it is rated AAA with a stable outlook. We have low unemployment rate and stable financial system. Our government undertakes large infrastructure projects and is pursuing an active investor approach to infrastructure projects. Infrastructure and the Project Financing Agency is a new agency. It is created under the Ministry of Finance in Australia, and the Treasury provides independent commercial and financial advice to support the delivery of Australian government infrastructure projects, and its purpose to support the purpose of the Treasury Infrastructure Agency is to support and also the capability to deliver the projects and strengthen confidence in the Australian economic investment environment. I think some of these may be a little bit more technical, and I don't want to bore you on a Sunday morning with all this, but just to also give you an idea about some of the businesses, Tamil businesses in Australia, which is going to be touched upon by my other colleagues later on in the sessions. I'm sure they will give you a little bit more in depth into that. But I'll say our Tamil businesses in Australia are mainly small to medium businesses. There are very few large businesses from the Tamil areas, from the Tamil people. Tamil businesses are still in its infancy, and it is trying to grow rapidly. Their main constraints are, lack of capital and funding. If you look at the Tamil migration in Australia, I think we had an white Australia policy until 1966. So most of the migration started afterwards. So in the 70s, few professionals came, mainly doctors. And in the 80s and 90s, quite a large number of Tamils from Sri Lanka, after the problems in Sri Lanka, they migrated. In fact, I migrated there in 1986. But I lived in other countries. When I migrated, I was in Singapore. At the time, there was a need for accountants in Australia. A friend of mine told me, why don't you apply? I'm going to Australia. Then I applied. I didn't want to come to Australia at that time. I was planning to go back to Sri Lanka in 1983. But because of the 1983 riots, I couldn't go back. So then I decided to apply to Australia, and that's how I moved to Australia. And since that time, I have my practice, and also my wife, she's here too. She runs a preschool kindergarten business. So with that, we have been carrying on. And in 1999, I decided to run for the elections, because at that time, we didn't have very many Tamils in my electorate, but then I thought, this is something I should show that the new community, the Tamil community, can do in the future, at least for the next generation. They should be also involved in political activities in the countries wherever they go. Because we are only teaching them to study either any of the professions, and we all know how the parents teach them to make sure they become a professional. But everybody misses out two things. One is business, and the other one is politics. See, both of them goes hand in hand. With the political support, with the political help, you can also be a good business person, and that's how you get your contacts. So I was there as a councillor initially elected. I stood as an independent candidate, and then in 2000 I became the deputy mayor, and I continued till 2004. But then I pursued my other interest, which is to serve the community. I have 2 daughters and 4 grandkids. So I thought, now it is time for me to try and give back what I have earned from the country where I was settled, as well as to help the Tamil community. So we started some schools in Sri Lanka. After the war, I built about 4 preschools in different areas, difficult areas, and we are doing pretty well. And my wife, she is continuing to run a preschool in Colombo for the last 2 years. So she spends most of the time there. I'm back in Sydney.
Sir, time.
And I will just conclude that. Am I running out of time?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll just finish it up by telling most of the startup businesses generally struggle with having no access to sufficient funds, and financial institutions and investment partners are hard to secure without a trading history. the onset of this is a difficult subject for many of you, but you should also be aware of the funding arrangements that are available for new projects. And thank you for listening to me, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to address here this forum, and Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you.